Welcome back to my 10 favorite people. Hope you're doing well. I'm incredibly excited for today's video because we finally have our Bitcoin breakout. And it's crazy to think that just over 2 weeks ago, we were talking about everything lining up nicely for Bitcoin, and somehow sentiment was fearful, even though we were entering July, which tends to be a good month in terms of seasonality. And we were watching the consistent ETF inflows and Bitcoin treasury announcements, and we had a feeling that the future looked bright. And now, just a few weeks later, Bitcoin is following that early cycle scenario outline almost perfectly, even though so many people said we were going to have a choppy summer and it was likely we weren't going to see a rally until Q4. And I'm already seeing a lot of calls for a bull trap or double top here, similar to what we saw in January of this year, but every single time Bitcoin has seen a clean breakout this cycle, whether it was in early 2024 or whether it was in late 2023 or even early 2023, Bitcoin has not gone back below the low that was set before that breakout. And I don't think this time is any different. We're now looking at just over a 10% return for July, which is slightly better than the average 9.6%. But if we look at the post-halving years of 2021 and 2017, those were closer to 18% returns, so we could still have some more room to run this month. We also have sentiment back comfortably in the greed region, which is what you would expect in these type of rallies, but we don't seem overheated quite yet. I'd be a bit more concerned once we start seeing extreme greed. And it's amazing to see how many investors and traders were caught off guard by this move, even though Bitcoin was consolidating right below resistance for weeks. Apparently 232,000 traders were liquidated on just the breakout rally, and there were over $1 billion in crypto shorts liquidated on that Bitcoin pump. And although it is very difficult to try to come up with price targets or have any idea how high this rally can go, what's a lot easier is to have a very obvious invalidation. Bitcoin should not be going anywhere near 110,000 at this point. And if we did end up getting a close back below it, that would likely be a sign that the cycle is in fact over, and that was the top for the year. But as of right now, Bitcoin is still well above that level, and as long as we consolidate at these higher prices, I would expect continuation, and I would expect this breakout to play out just like all of the breakouts before it, where a lot of people were forced to FOMO back in, a lot of shorts got liquidated, and a lot of investors were caught off guard. And it looks like Monday's free weekly report called Only a Matter of Time was spot on in expecting a breakout and price discovery rally in the very near future, and it is beginning to feel like Bitcoin is gearing up for a blow-off top move here as price action becomes more and more vertical and the pullbacks get quicker and shallower as we approach that blow-off top peak. As for my portfolio, I haven't made any changes yet, but I will likely be taking some small profits tomorrow as my cash position has been going down while the value of my spot holdings have been going up, especially Ethereum, which is now over 20%. And as always, if you'd like to learn more about my portfolio system or mental models that I use to navigate this market, you can check out the Crypto Enjoyers program. I finally finished the mental models course, so I will leave the current pricing for about a week and then it'll be going up. And I've been receiving a lot of questions on what I mean by mental model, or could I give an example of a mental model? So I went ahead and put one of them on the about page so you can go ahead and watch it and see if that interests you. But it definitely feels amazing watching Bitcoin put in a move like this. We're officially above all resistance levels for the first time since December of last year, and we have survived some insane volatility over the past 8 months. We had the false breakdown in early January, followed by the false breakout during the Trump inauguration, which caught everybody off guard. Then we had the extreme fear and panic during all of the tariff drama when traditional markets were selling off. Then we had another false breakout very recently in about May of this year, followed by that correction and sell-off, which made many investors flip bearish. And now here we are watching a price discovery breakout. ETF inflows are still looking incredibly solid as investors try and chase this move, with our first ever back-to-back $1 billion inflow days coming into these Bitcoin ETFs. And you can see how crazy those back-to-back inflows were compared to the months that came before it and how much money is piling into this asset. And somehow retail interest is still almost completely non-existent. If we look at the Google search trends here, this is a 30-day moving average. You can see that the search trends tend to lag quite a bit after price. So as of right now, even though Bitcoin is getting close to 120,000, there still hasn't been a huge spike in interest. But once we do see that huge spike, which usually coincides with extreme greed market sentiment, that tends to be the major warning sign that a local top could be close, but as of right now, we are nowhere near there quite yet. And speaking of nowhere near there, we still have quite a bit of room to run if we go based off the global liquidity index and its relationship with Bitcoin. Right now, it's pointing to a Bitcoin top around mid to early September. We are seeing the global liquidity index roll over a bit here, but it's too early to tell if it's just a brief pullback like some of the ones we've seen during this uptrend, or if it's the beginning of a new downtrend like some of the ones we've seen this cycle, but we should be able to tell very soon. Another interesting thing about September is that's when the market is expecting the next Fed rate cut, and the market is now expecting a pause in July. So perhaps we could see a rally going into that meeting as markets begin to price in those rate cuts and begin to look forward to them, just to see a local top once that rate cut actually happens as a sell the news event, since 25 basis points isn't going to change much, most likely. We're also still patiently waiting for that bounce in the US dollar index, which is long overdue and keeps getting pushed back, and that will likely put some downward pressure on global liquidity and could result in a Bitcoin local top. But the macro trend for global liquidity is still fully intact. We're still waiting for the Fed to announce an end to quantitative tightening, and perhaps that could happen at the September meeting as well. The labor market is still holding on and doesn't seem to be falling apart, so I'm still not taking recession calls that seriously. Inflation is being stubborn, but it's still headed in the right direction, but this is the main reason we're not seeing any rate cuts in July and instead have to wait until September. And GDP is still positive, even though I still see so many people saying that we're in a recession, but as of right now, that does not seem to be the case, and risk assets like the S&P 500 and Bitcoin definitely seem to be pricing this in. And speaking of Bitcoin, we're still comfortably within the expensive region. Right now, the 200-week moving average for Bitcoin is at almost exactly 50K, which makes the math for each of these price levels super easy. I would consider anything under 75,000 cheap and anything under 100K fair value. And I would consider anything above 125K to be very expensive for Bitcoin at this phase in the cycle, and I will likely take profits more aggressively once we reach that price region. And speaking of profits, I have not been able to say that word while looking at an Ethereum chart for a very long time, but we just had a major range reclaim of that pivotal $2,800 level. A close above 2,800 here would be a huge reclaim of our old range that we haven't been above since February of this year. And my next target would be the range mid at 3,400 and the range high at 4,000. ETF buyers seem to agree because we've been seeing some huge spot ETF inflows for Ethereum. We saw $200 million a few days ago, $400 million after that, and then $200 million the following day once again. Nothing compared to what Bitcoin is seeing, but with Ethereum having a smaller market cap, these are still very impressive inflows, and there seems to be a rotation happening. And we can also see it on the Ethereum Bitcoin pair. We know everybody's favorite price pattern alongside head and shoulders is cup and handle, and this looks like a very clear cup and handle formation for Ethereum, which seems to be very undervalued on its Bitcoin pair compared to where it's been historically. As for Solana, still lagging behind a bit and still fighting to reclaim its range mid, so I would love to see that happen before today's weekly close, but we're still seeing some treasury company announcements for Solana alongside Ethereum and Bitcoin, and alongside the staking ETFs. That should be a great narrative to send Solana higher. Its Bitcoin pair is holding on to support for dear life, so hopefully it holds that level and puts in a higher low. But it is nice to see Solana finally once again outperforming the S&P 500 and NASDAQ on a 1-year rolling basis. You really want to see riskier assets that you hold outperform safer ones. Otherwise, what's the point of taking all that risk in the first place? And I wouldn't be surprised if Ethereum plays some catch up here too, and we see both Solana and Ethereum significantly outperforming the S&P 500 and NASDAQ in the very near future. But as we look forward, the federal government is still running huge deficits. The trend seems to be worsening, and exponential debt growth results in exponential money supply growth. So I'm very comfortable holding risk assets like the S&P 500 and fixed supply risk assets like Bitcoin. But as always, let me know what you expect. Thank you so much for the support on the recent videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.